remember, we've been working through some figures that have fallen more or less along what we've called the skeptical spectrum. Thus far, we've focused on two of the philosophers who are furthest to the right on the skeptical spectrum, Plato and Descartes. They both offered arguments for different forms of skepticism. But today we're going to move way to the left, right? We're going to go almost all the way to the least skeptical epistemology that you can have. We're going to look at Augustine and his sort of faith-based or trust-based epistemology. So in the terms that we've been using in the class, Augustine's epistemology is optimistic about the extent to which we can know about the world, the amount of knowledge that we can have. And it's good to note, it's explicitly offered in the context of a defense of his Christian faith. So today, he does two things. First, he presents us with what we might call an anti-skeptical argument. This is a general argument meant to lay the basis for his faith-based epistemology. And secondly, he offers a defense of the rational structure of Christianity. It's important to note that those are separate projects, although in the work, they sort of happen at the same time, and it kind of goes back and forth between the two of them. And we will look at both of the projects, but in the lecture, we'll mostly focus on the first, right? So we'll mostly focus on Augustine's anti-skeptical strategies. Okay, so you might be wondering, what is an anti-skeptical argument? Okay, here's how we'll define it. It's an argument to the conclusion that some belief or domain of knowledge is safe from skeptical worries or challenges. So let me share my screen again. Okay. So again, think about Socrates. Socrates goes to a politician and he says, tell me what justice is. The politician talks to him for a bit. He uses the elenchus and he says, so we can never know anything positive about justice. I've just proven, I've just argued. We can't know anything about justice. An anti-skeptical argument is just an argument that skeptical argument is false. In a way, think of it as a defensive move, right? The skeptic comes up to you and says, you can't know about X, and you, employing an anti-skeptical argument, say, well, no, of course I can know about X, right? Or that's some broad domain of knowledge or some particular kind of knowledge. Now, here's two different kinds of anti-skeptical argument. I just want to emphasize that there are many different ways that you could offer an anti-skeptical argument, but I'm going to offer two different kinds just as examples for you. The first kind is what we might call a foundationalist argument from common sense, okay? This is an argument offered by Thomas Reid, by G.E. Moore, philosophers we won't be explicitly looking at in this class, but that are very important throughout the history of philosophy. And their arguments usually go something like this. They start with a premise that's just unquestionable common sense, right? For instance, G.E. Moore says, I know that this is a hand. I know that this is a hand. I know that I have hands. And then they say, they make the conditional claim, but if I know that this is a hand, then I can know that there's an external world, or that there's a world external to my mind, right? So here, they're targeting the skeptical attack that we can't have any knowledge about the external world. And they're saying, well, look, it's common sense that I have hands, but if I know that I have hands, then I can know something about the external world. Therefore, I can know at least that there's a world external to my mind. So you start from common sense, from what you think is just rationally certain, obvious, and then you move to some big picture claim about a domain that the skeptic is trying to call into question. So that's one kind of skeptical argument. Here's another one. And I call this one an argument from parity. So if you were talking to a skeptic and the skeptic said, look, you can't believe claims in some domain, right? Maybe the skeptic says, you can't believe claims in the domain of science because sometimes science is wrong, right? You could say to the skeptic, okay, you believe claims in some particular domain, but claims in the domain you're attacking are equally as justified as the claims in the domain that you've targeted. Therefore, you should believe claims in this particular domain. We're going to flesh that out because without a specific example, it's a little bit more difficult to understand. So let's look at it with respect to Augustine's particular argumentative strategy. So Augustine is writing in response to critics who say, you can't believe in anything that can't be seen, right? In particular, they think that unseen religious entities like God or angels or the soul, they think these things are irrational to believe in because you can't see them, right? So their claim is that the Christian faith is irrational because it requires belief in things that are unseen. We should only believe in the things that we see. So what Augustine does is he tries to identify things that the skeptic already believe in that are also unseen, that are relevantly similar to the class of beliefs the skeptic is targeting. And his argument proceeds in a few different steps, and we'll just start with the first of those, right? So Augustine's first argument goes like this. Well, look, the mind is unseen, but it's not irrational to believe that you have a mind. So it's not irrational to believe in things that are unseen. The idea here, Augustine's idea, is that the skeptic has to admit that they have a mind, right? He thinks they'd be contradicting themselves if they said, well, okay, you've just shown me I can't believe in the mind. Then he would say, well, where are your beliefs stored? Why are you arguing in the first place? What are you using to form arguments or reason in the first place? So he's taking some bit of knowledge that they're going to have to admit that they have, and he's showing that it's relevantly similar. He's showing that this is something that's unseen. It's not irrational to believe that you have a mind. Therefore, it's not irrational to believe in the unseen in general. For the next step, he just replaces your mind with other things that are similarly unseen, right? So the skeptic might say to him, okay, well, look, I know that I have a mind, and I know that it's not visible to the eye, to my physical eye, but I can introspect. Maybe I have a special sense. I can introspect and see it internally or something. Well, Augustine would say, okay, you believe in your mind, even though you can't see it. I'll grant you that maybe you have this inner sense or something like that. What about the minds of other people? You believe in those too, but surely you can't introspect those. And in this way, Augustine continues to sort of make his argument more general, right? He goes through three different steps. He starts by arguing that since the mind is unseen and it's not irrational to believe in the mind, therefore it's not irrational to believe in things that are unseen. Moves from there to the existence of other minds. And he says, look, you have to believe in other minds, otherwise you couldn't have any friends. Otherwise, human society would break down. You clearly rely on this belief when you go out in the world and interact with other people. Therefore, there's something that's unseen that it's rational to believe in. And he moves from there all the way to the domain of testimony, right? So he says, look, you don't have firsthand access. You can't see, you can't see things that are distant from you in space, right? So I don't think anybody's in Chicago right now, but you believe that Chicago exists, right? And some of you haven't even ever been to Chicago. Maybe I should take like a different city. Vancouver, is that a city? Or is that I don't know, geography. Vancouver, right? No, nobody here has been to Vancouver. Why would you go to Vancouver? Vancouver exists, right? Of course it exists, but you've never seen it. So look there, you've believed in something that's unseen, right? That's Augustine's point. Also the past. Basically, Augustine, in making these broader and broader arguments, is trying to say, okay, skeptic, you started by saying, let's not believe in anything unseen. But I'm going to show you, it turns out most of our knowledge, most of the things we think we believe, or the things that we think we know, are unseen, things that are unseen by us. We don't firsthand visibly witness them, right? Okay. Now, zooming out a little bit, Augustine's arguments here are anti-skeptical. So they're defensive, but they're not merely defensive. he's starting to spell out a positive epistemology here, one that develops further in his comments on the authority of the church. In particular, he's arguing that we ought to base our epistemology in trust, and not just trust in our senses or in the things which we can ourselves reason to, but trust in the testimony of others, in tradition and the historical record, and crucially in divine revelation. We're going to talk more about that bit, the divine revelation bit, in the next couple of classes when we consider religious authority in the context of natural theology. But it's worth noting here at the end of our epistemology unit that theistic epistemology is a somewhat radical alternative to the skeptical pictures that we've been considering. It's also worth noting that there are other optimistic epistemologies out there. They're not all essentially theistic. So the fact that we considered Augustine's epistemology as representative of optimistic epistemologies shouldn't lead you to believe that only theists can have optimistic epistemologies. That's not true. There are others out there, but they have to find other rational foundations. Okay, good. So if everybody's with me, let's zoom out even more. Like I said, we're ending the epistemology unit today. And so I want to give you a big picture sense of the things we've covered. Okay, so today we're going to transition into natural theology. We're going to be talking much more about natural theology and what that means in the next class. But for a minute, I just want to review what we've talked about so far. You've learned about two different kinds of skepticism: Socratic ignorance as a kind of intellectual virtue, and Cartesian skepticism as the pursuit of rational foundations. You've learned about their tools, the elenchus, the method of doubt, and about various structural relationships that beliefs can bear toward one another: foundationalism, justification, warrant, etc. At this point, then, you should feel comfortable starting to articulate and evaluate your own epistemology, your own thoughts about epistemology. Are you a skeptic or a foundationalist? What do you think grounds epistemic justification or authority? Does religion or God play a role? Should we put our trust in others, in experts maybe, or in rational reflection or the scientific method? These are the sorts of questions that could help you uncover your core philosophical beliefs about epistemology. And in small group today, we're going to be talking more about some of those. So in closing, I challenge you just to reflect a bit after class about your own epistemological views and assumptions, and to think about them within the broader context that we've offered in this unit.